Welcome to the Wimbo Worldwide F1 podcast.
F1 content around the globe.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Wimbo Worldwide F1 podcast episode 15. And today I have with me another English YouTuber. With me always moaning about British bias, it's kind of surprising that I have this guy here, but people know that I love England and English YouTubers. I just don't like Sky Sports F1. So, ladies and gentlemen, this YouTuber, I've just recently found him on Twitter and I started watching his content, and his content is really lovely. It's contemporary news-based videos about Formula 1. And I'll let him do the rest of the introductions himself. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to Paul from The Grid Cab. Hello, Paul.
How are you doing? Thanks very much for having me on. Lovely to be here.
Have you been busy with content creation at the minute?
There's a lot happening at the moment, isn't there? I know we're just about to head into the summer break and everything. I'm not complaining because I've been through the off-season and it's like a desert in terms of F1 news, but it's great to have so much going on, and there's loads happening at the moment, and we're certainly not starved for news at the moment, that's for sure.
Yeah, Ocon going to Haas, Max Verstappen getting told he's not allowed to do sim racing anymore, and then he just plainly denied it in the interview he did himself. There's the McLaren 1-2 news and the fallout from it. We'll get to all that later. First, I just want to know, how did you get into Formula 1?
Oh, how did I get into Formula 1? Well, I think, from what my dad would say to me, I started watching it pretty much kind of since day one. He used to sit and watch it, he'd watch the races, I'd sit there with him as a little kid and everything. The first memory I kind of have of watching F1 was, funnily enough, Damon Hill winning the title in 1996. I remember it was very early morning, I was very tired, and whether I was dragged downstairs or I was woken up by myself, I'm not sure. But that was my first memory, and then it really kind of kicked off properly from about 1997 onwards. And I think the PlayStation games, the PS1 games, were a massive help for that, because although it's a game, it's really like an encyclopedia for your knowledge of who drives for where, and for a young kid at the time, it was absolutely fantastic.
What year were you born?
88.
Okay. So you were 9 years old when you started playing the first F1 game then?
I absolutely was, yeah. It was good times. And it was really to be plonked into those late 90s years. And looking back, it was such a fantastic time for Formula 1. 97, 98, 99, you're right in the middle of that Michael Schumacher, Mika Hakkinen thing going on. And it was great because you had all the magazines at the time. You had the Duke video, the season review videos on VHS. I know you've got so much content at your fingertips nowadays with internet and YouTube and everything, but it was a pretty good time to start watching F1 and for it to grow from there, I think.
Yeah, I'm a little jealous of that because I started watching in 2015 and the ball was already rolling then, although there was a big spike. Thanks to that Netflix show.
You mean as a Dutch fan, you went there for Jos Verstappen and Spiker and all that sort of stuff?
No. In those years, I was too busy going out drinking. And I knew.
I think Jos and Spiker were as well, by the look of it.
I did have some people in my area that watched it, but it was more a sort of a niche thing, where I came from. You like football, or you watch speed skating. That's a big sport in Holland. But Formula 1, there was Jos Verstappen hype going on, but it could have gotten bigger if his results would have been bigger, but he was always in the slow.
He never had the car. He never quite had the car, did he? He was always sort of. He did some interesting testings for various teams. I remember. We'll get into this later, but like I'm a massive Jordan fan, or was a massive Jordan fan. I still kind of collect some of their stuff now. I remember he had even a test for them back in the day when the car was good. I think it was around 98, 99, that sort of time. And I don't know, we'll never know. But he was an interesting driver back in the day, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, one of many interesting drivers. When I'm doing all my research for my older videos, you know, there's a few names that you keep stumbling on. The other day I posted a video about, you know, Jos in the Arrows team, and his teammate was a Brazilian called Bernaldi.
Enrique Bernaldi, yeah.
And they didn't get along. And Johnny Herbert, he popped up in all those teams from Benetton to.
He went to Benetton, was at Sauber, Stewart,
Arrows.
Jaguar, yeah.
He's been to all these teams as well.
Yeah, so from watching F1 back in the 90s, I can't really explain why, but I used to have this irrational fascination and love for Jean Alesi. And he, again, like Jos, he wasn't one of these drivers that really kind of excelled. He never quite got there, but it was kind of from watching those Duke season review videos back in the day, he just seemed to either be absolutely amazing or absolutely dreadful. There was none that he didn't quite have that middle ground, and seeing him in some of those early 90s Ferraris as well was just absolutely amazing. But he was someone who should have done better as well, I think.
Yeah, I can't say I know an awful lot about Jean Alesi, to be honest, but
he's probably, I think there must be a stat somewhere where he's retired from the lead the most times, or
don't they call
times.
Don't they call Charles Leclerc a lazy sometimes?
I have thought there is some striking similarities between him and Alesi. I think I have to say they're both very emotional, very unlucky as well. They both drive for Ferrari, and they just can't seem to get it together for whatever reason. But Leclerc has a few years ahead of him, so we'll see what he comes up with.
Yeah. Now we can touch on that later, you know, because at the minute we're still talking about how you got into F1 and where the love started.
Yeah, there was times where, you know, as a young kid, we didn't really kind of go to races and things like that early on, but what we did do, and it's such a shame you can't do this with F1 now because of testing bans and things like that, but back in those days teams would just have testing sessions at Silverstone, and as a fan you could just go and watch. I don't know what it cost because it was, you know, back then, but you'd literally just sit in the stands and just watch F1 cars drive around. And for a fan who there doesn't need to be racing going on, it was absolutely fantastic. And sometimes you'd be sitting there in the pouring rain with an umbrella up just watching cars go around. And you know, we'll get into the whole live aspect later, but that was like the final piece of the jigsaw. And there was one time me, my dad and my brother, I think this must have been about 98 from memory, because I remember the livery of the car. We were driving past Silverstone on the way home from somewhere, and we thought, oh, the Jordan factory's down the road, so let's go and have a look in that. And so we got to the factory and the gate was open, so let's drive up to the front. And it all seemed, you got to the front and it all seemed to be open, so we actually walked in. And they were such a fantastic team back in the day. They were really good to their fans, and they literally just gave me, my dad and my brother a tour around the factory, just showed us everything. And when you consider how locked down and super secret, you know, they're almost guarded by military police, you know, the F1 teams. Now, you know, we saw the factory, Eddie Jordan's office, all this fantastic stuff. And when we were done, you know, me and my brother, we were literally given 2 goodie bags of stuff, like a cap, photos, stickers, the lot. And I know perhaps F1 teams don't really need to kind of do that now. They can kind of reach out to people and other ways, through social media and stuff like that. But like, that was the hook, I think. And that's actually probably where my fascination with Jordan still comes from to this day, with collecting various bits and pieces. It's a fantastic memory to have, seeing all that sort of stuff from such an early age.
Yeah. Well, talking about Jordan, I had contact with Heinz-Harald Frenzen about a month ago. I made a video on how he won the French Grand Prix with a broken leg.
Yes, he did, yeah.
And I always advertise my videos on Twitter, and somebody tagged him in it, and we got talking through DM, and he shared it a few times as well, because a week later, on the 27th of June, it was the 25-year anniversary of that. So I asked him if he wanted to come on my podcast, and I think that's where I lost him.
He's an interesting character because he was someone who he disappeared for years. Like he didn't really have much of a presence, and from what I see on social media, he's kind of re-emerged. I think he did Eddie Jordan, David Coulthard's podcast, and he's done a couple of other bits and pieces. But I mean, he's someone who's got a fair amount of stories to tell, I think. All these guys do, in fairness.
Yeah, no, it was definitely nice, because it was the second F1 driver I had a conversation with. The first one being Jolyon Palmer.
Oh, wow.
In Zandvoort last year. But anyway, this podcast is more to get you introduced. So when did you start making YouTube videos, and what compels you to do it?
Oh, so I started my first YouTube video was about a year ago, I think just under a year ago. But the original, it was about 3 years late, to be honest. The initial idea to do something started, I think 2020 or 2019, and the original idea was to do a podcast at the time. And it was funny because when I had this idea, I was working for a company called Dennis Publishing, who do automotive magazines, and because you're speaking with all these people at classic car companies and perhaps on the motorsport side of things, a lot of people know people who once did stuff, including Formula One. So there was this concept of speaking to people who worked for F1 teams, have all these interesting stories. They're not the drivers, they're not the celebrities, they're not the important people, but they've been there, they've done it, they have all the interesting stories. These are the guys who stayed up all night to fix Takuma Sato's car because he's wrecked it. I want to hear what he has to say. So anyway, it's an idea which went nowhere. You know how COVID and everything like that, things happen, life happens, procrastinate, and it eventually 3 years later it happened, and it took a lot to get off the ground. My wife was fantastic and helping me with it and suggesting how to do things and everything, because she's great with organisation. I'm rubbish at that sort of thing myself. And but it's come to this, and just a year in, I'm just off 5,000 subscribers now, and I think it's going pretty well. There's a lot to improve on, but I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I've easily one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. The F1 knowledge is there, but the technical knowledge and all the stuff of how to do it, I knew absolutely nothing about filming, recording, any of that stuff beforehand. So you're just endlessly, and that was probably the block. That was probably what held it up for so many years, trying to figure out how to do all this stuff. And I think but actually something I just remembered which spurred this thing on, what could actually get this thing started. When I was working at Dennis Publishing, this is about sort of 2019, the company bought a couple of brands. They bought a couple of brands to join their portfolio. One of these brands was WTF1. So one day I walk into the office and I think I was going up the stairs and there's Matt and Tommy. And I'm like, what the hell are they doing here? And like, it was such a strange thing because no one seemed to know who they were or the significance of it. Like everyone in this company is doing, this whole thing, but it's like no one knew the significance of who these people were, what they did, their fan base, the importance of it. Eventually it all got sold off to someone else, but it was just like, I didn't ever speak to them or anything, but just seeing those guys, you kind of think, so actually if I started something, it could potentially lead on to go somewhere. So that's what sort of planted the seed, I think.
Well, that brings me right to the next thing. Is like, what is your goal then? Like, do you want to become a professional YouTuber, like a full-time one, or do you want to have newsletters and your own sort of place in the whole F1 market? Do you want to reach more people? Like, what's the end goal?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? For me, the end goal, I think, would be to make this is my full-time priority. I think if it gets into a position where, first of all, there's a demand for it, and I have enough of a following where I can bring news, my take, my information to people, and they enjoy it, and they want to do more. And something I really love doing is I love interacting with followers. All my comments I try and reply and respond as much as I can, and answer questions and all this sort of stuff. And it's really grateful. I'm really grateful when you get a good reply and also good feedback as well. But also, like, you have to take the rough with the smooth. If someone says that isn't so good, you kind of think, okay, but it's just, we all have negative comments sometimes, but it comes with the territory, doesn't it? But I think if it can grow and I can turn it into its own self-sufficient machine where if people want the latest bit of F1 news or a take or whatever, they go to the Grid Gab, for example. So I'll keep my options open, see what the future holds, keep doing what I'm doing, and we'll see where it goes. But I'm really pleased with it so far and how it's gone, and I'm also really thankful and appreciative of people who have given it time and taken time out of their day to watch the clips.
Well, to be honest, I'm very surprised that you're only doing this for less than a year, because I know the struggle of starting from scratch. It took me 13 months to get monetized, and in October my channel will be 2 years old, and I won't have 5k subscribers then, I don't think. So for you to have done that in such a short time span is very impressive.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It's I just try and be as consistent as I can, and just pay attention to the news and just listen to what people are kind of interested in as well at the moment. And rather than if there's something happened, if there's something in the news of like take the last Grand Prix for example, Piastri winning, rather than reporting that Piastri won the Hungarian Grand Prix, try and do a different take where it makes people kind of go, oh, I didn't quite maybe see it that way, or that's an interesting example. And if you do a take, I'll really try and make the effort not to knock a driver down. Like if I have something negative to say, I'll always try and find something positive to say as well. Just try and have that balance and sort of double perspective. There's been a couple of instances, in fact, where it's clear someone's watched the video and they've seen the bits about me perhaps being maybe not so complimentary on a driver. They've left a comment and exited the video, whereas if they've hung around for a bit longer, they'll see me say, maybe a nice bit or a good bit, complimentary bit at the end. So just try and have that balance and maybe try and offer like a different perspective, I think, is what I try and do.
Well, I just noticed that you have a very relaxed way of speaking to the camera, and I agreed with all your takes. So that's always a good thing. And yeah, I just felt right at home at your channel. I've watched about 3 or 4 videos now because, like I said, I've only just discovered you, but I'll definitely stick around. You'll get many more comments from me.
Oh, thank you. That's really, really good.
So last weekend you were in Hungary yourself.
I was, and
have you visited many races?
To be absolutely honest with you, I haven't. That was the first time I've been to a Grand Prix weekend in a long, long time. My last one, shockingly, was the British Grand Prix in 2008, a long time ago. And the reason is, it's just simply because, first of all, I think the pricing is just absolutely mental. And anytime the Grand Prix's been on, that's the time where you've been on holidays, kind of doing other things. So just the timing has never been quite right, and the numbers have never added up. But the Hungary thing was interesting because as we speak, I'm currently in Serbia and will be for the next month. And I noticed, the Hungary Grand Prix coming up, race day sold out, weekend tickets sold out, but practice and qualifying was still available. I thought that's quite interesting. So I looked at the prices and it didn't seem too bad. And then I looked at what transport or a coach from Serbia to Budapest would cost. Again, not too bad. Hotel, not too bad. And it seemed to work out with our, as a family, our plans and everything. So I just went up, and it was an absolutely fantastic experience. I think there's always this battle between what's best to watch Formula One. Is it live or is it on the TV? A lot of people like TV because you get all the up-to-date information, commentary and all this sort of stuff. And I think doing what I did, going to watch the qualifying live on the Saturday and then watch the race on TV on Sunday, have I accidentally stumbled into the perfect way for some, I find, and maybe for some other people, to watch Formula One, because you go to qualifying on Sunday, you still get the live thing, you still get to watch the cars. You've got practice 3 in the morning, you've got qualifying in the afternoon, and then you've still got all the other support things, Formula 2, Formula 3 going on, so you still get to watch the young up-and-coming people as well. And you still get the atmosphere. It's absolutely buzzing still. I mean, don't be put off by the fact that it's qualifying or anything like that. It is, it's full to the rafters. The atmosphere is there. The Orange Army out in full force, and I think they're fantastic, to be honest. I think they bring this atmosphere to races that is absolutely amazing, and I think F1 would be poorer without them. And it was brilliant because all the action was there. As long as you get good seats as well, that's so important. I was sat pretty much opposite the pit straight, and so you can, whilst you see the cars zipping along, you can still kind of see everything that's going on in the pits and everything. And so for anyone out there who's perhaps maybe put off by the notion or the price of getting a weekend ticket or a race ticket, if the numbers add up, if everything works and it's convenient, go and watch qualifying, or maybe even just go and watch practice on a Friday, because it's still a fantastic experience just to watch the cars live and everything that goes with it. It adds so much more. And after this, I've sort of decided I'm going to do that again. I think obviously I'll try and go and watch a race if I can, but if it comes up again, particularly on the European circuit, to go watch it live again, absolutely will.
Yeah, well, my wife and I bought tickets for Zandvoort, a passepartout, so it's the 3 full days.
Yeah.
But again, I'm doing these podcasts for networking, but going to the track is also for networking, because I'll reach out to all kinds of content creators and have selfies with them and have chats with them. Just because I understand what they're doing, and we have the same passion. And I love speaking to people. So when I was in Austria last year, I took photos with Checo Perez fans from Mexico, and I took pictures with Aston Martin fans from what's the neighboring country to Austria? Maybe
There's
it
a
was
few.
Serbia.
I said there's a few.
Yeah, there's a few. So you get all these kind of Italians. I was having a laugh with all these Italians.
Oh yeah, they're great. Yeah.
Because one of them asked if I knew any Italian, and I obviously only knew the swear words, so that was fun. Oh, and buongiorno, I knew buongiorno.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
And watching that, and that's something I completely missed when you asked me, is seeing all the fans. It's absolutely fantastic, and just to get that, you kind of get a real reading, I suppose. I suppose it depends exactly which race you go to and which continent and all this sort of stuff, but you get a real live reading as to who people are following the most and who's the most popular, who isn't, and I know in Hungary I noticed that Red Bull was very popular, obviously with Max and everything. McLaren's very popular, and funnily enough, and I something I'm really interested in is F1 merchandise and things like that. I love watching and seeing who's kind of wearing what. And interestingly enough, over the weekend, I didn't see anyone wearing any Alpine stuff except a group of about 8 or 9 very confused looking French guys. So I even saw more people wearing Sauber stuff. Interesting, the black and green stuff. So Alpine, they need to get themselves together when it comes to PR and sort of stuff, because I suppose if you go to watch the French Grand Prix, it's a totally different sort of thing. But it's just fascinating just to have your finger on the pulse as to who's following what.
Yeah, well, fans are a lot of glory hunters as well. You have the Orange Army there because Max is winning so often, or that the Orange Army has been there from day one since Max started. But yeah, he started winning races quite early as well, and that's when it really started to become booming for the Orange Army.
Exactly,
and if Alpine starts getting constant podiums and wins with a very popular driver, then you'll see the merch coming out as well.
It was funny actually, because where I was sitting, there was these two couples from America, and they were all cheering Max Verstappen. They all had Red Bull stuff, Max Verstappen stuff, and they asked me to take a photo for them. So I did, and we started chatting, and I just said, so you guys, they said they're from California and everything. And I said, so what do you guys think about Logan Sargent? Like, are you guys rooting for him in any kind of way? And they go, nah, he's not very good. He's a loser. He's not good at all.
He's a loser.
That's like the ultimate insult for Americans. But anyway, and I find that fascinating. How just because someone's doing badly, it depends. I mean, some people support drivers because of their nationality, some support of who they are as a person, some support just because they're winning. But the impression I got from these guys is they supported Max simply just because he's winning. Yeah. We'll wait and see. So, but it's going to be interesting to see, if the Orange Army are going to have to buy all Mercedes stuff down the line. So we'll have to wait and see.
So, talking about favorite drivers, do you have a favorite driver and a favorite team?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few who I really kind of look out for at the moment. So I think team-wise, I think Williams is my favourite team at the moment, and I've, ever since I was little, been following them kind of on and off. Ah, there you go. Good man.
It's new. I still have the card on it.
Did you find that in the bin, or was it donated, or did you buy it?
I got it for my birthday in June.
Oh, very nice. Good man yourself.
So I got loads of. Pretty much, I want to get all the teams. The caps.
It's good. I mean, it's expensive. It's an expensive endeavour. What you're thinking of, but it's nice. It's nice to have some stuff, and I've got a couple of other Williams bits and pieces. But they've just got such a great history and heritage, and I've loved a lot of the drivers that they've had. So Alex Albon is a guy who I look out for at the moment. Williams and Albon is not doing so great this year, but you keep plugging away for them anyway. I'm just thinking what the drivers. I've always liked Nico Hulkenberg. I think he's a guy who hasn't really had a fair crack of the whip. I know he made some mistakes earlier on in his career which might have cost him, but I think if the way he is now, if you just sat him in a Ferrari or a Mercedes or even a Red Bull, it would just be fascinating to see what he could do. It really, really would. And I think lastly, the last person who's won me over really is Oscar Piastri. I think he is seriously the real deal. He really showed some excellent flashes of performance, but also how he is as a human being. His approach, he just seems so down to earth and not buying into the whole, sort of celebrity aspect side of it. And he's really kind of respectful for other drivers, and also having Mark Webber as a manager, to keep your feet on the ground and make sure your head doesn't get too big. It's he's someone he's got a big future ahead of him. Well, I think so. As long as he keeps on this road, yeah. It's
a bit like your YouTube channel. What you've accomplished in 1 year. Oscar Piastri has been in Formula One for a year and a half, but the way he composes himself on the track and off the track, it's like he's been there for 5 or 6 years.
Absolutely. You think if you have to remind yourself that this is his second season, isn't it?
Yeah. So, like I said, a year and a half.
Yeah. It's a start. Like if you were new to F1 and you said, by the way, this guy's been in here for 5 years, you think, oh, okay, fair enough. He just has he's just got it like screwed on. If you
compare him to Russell, Russell bottled a few wins and had a fair few of weird incidents and weird radios, and I like Russell because I do too. Yeah, he's a funny bloke, and he brings color to the grid. But he doesn't have a head on him like Oscar has, as in confidence-wise and attitude.
For sure, and I think Russell, again, he's another guy I liked, and when he was at Williams, you have that magical combination of when you have a driver you like and a team you like, and when it's together, it's absolutely amazing. But I wonder if Russell, he falls into this sort of maybe kind of overthinking, slightly too emotional category that guys like perhaps, Lando Norris or Charles Leclerc fall into, where they don't have that sort of super logical Terminator thing about them. Like guys like clearly Verstappen does, clearly Michael Schumacher had, Lewis Hamilton, all these guys.
What I thought was typical was George Russell put it on pole, and as soon as he's out of the car, he's doing a pose again. And to me, that's not something you do natural. This is something that maybe he's sitting at home thinking, if I get pole, I'm going to do the pose. You know what I mean? It seemed like rehearsed, and he does it with all these things.
It's all pre-arranged. His PR team is inside going, if you get pole, you have to do this thing. You put your arms out and all this sort of stuff. And I think if you actually got a glimpse inside, it would be amazing to see how much is rehearsed and rearranged. And actually, it's funny you mentioned this. Like at the Hungarian qualifying, you go to the stand, you see all the drivers being interviewed and all this sort of stuff. And it's great to see them and everything. It's great to see them in person. But the impression I really got from that is that very few of these guys are really enjoying this.
No, but I mean, could you imagine? You're getting asked a question, and then you have to move up 5 feet, and somebody else asks the same question.
I know.
You know, they're telling the reporters, each single one of them, the same story 20 times.
Yeah.
And it would bore me, and it bores them.
I know. There was a guy, I can't remember who, I don't know if it was a YouTuber or some random guy, but he put a video up a little while ago where he would ask F1 drivers just the most random, ridiculous questions, and it was absolutely fantastic. You know, he'd say, I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember the exact questions.
There's two American fellas called the Red Flags podcast, and they would do stuff like that.
Yeah, like they'd go up to a driver and ask him, like, what's your favourite packet of crisps? Or like, you know, if you're hanging toilet paper, do you do it face down or down the back? Like, really give a glimpse into who these people are. And it's really interesting because, like you said, you know, being asked 1,000 times a season, you know, do you think you've got a good car this weekend?
But especially at the minute with the silly season going on, the only thing they ask Yuki is, are you going to get the Red Bull seat? Why hasn't Helmut Marko said anything?
Yeah.
And then Daniel Ricciardo, one half of the reporters is asking him if he's going to lose the seat, and the other half is asking if he's going to get the Red Bull seat. Then Perez, you know, he told the press today that he's 100% sure he will be in the car after Spa. But yeah, if you get those questions 20 times in a row, then it becomes quite annoying, and that's one of the reasons why I think the Formula One drivers don't want more than 24 races. They'd be happy enough with 20 races.
Absolutely, and you know, you do kind of wonder if not only does it kind of dilute the sport, but also you've got to think, like, these are human beings, these are people, and you know, to be away for 24 races, and also the teams are full of people who have families and relationships and that sort of thing. And I think I've touched on a couple of times in videos before, thinking, like, you know, all these people have got to travel away 24 times a year, and you know, what sort of schedule, what sort of life is that? I suppose if you're young, it's fantastic, but I suppose if you've got a family, it's a bit more difficult. But you know, here we are from the outside, you know, trying to get any kind of glimmer and peek into the inside of the machine. But I bet it's, you know, particularly when we're talking about drivers, you know, rehearsing and having everything pre-arranged, like I bet there's a lot more going on than we can ever imagine.
Yeah, well, we got to this talking about George Russell and his poses. Have you had any other drivers that you're fond of? Or do you have a driver you really dislike? That's juicy as well.
Yeah, there's no one. Do you know what? There's no one who I dislike, but there's drivers who sometimes do stupid, ridiculous things that I can't believe. The one that springs to mind is at the last Grand Prix. You must have seen it in the cool-down room with Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton. I couldn't believe he did that, and you know,
wait,
I think
who did what? So
from what I remember, Lando Norris was in the cool-down room. Lewis Hamilton said that the McLaren was really fast and everything, and clearly Norris was pissed off because he threw his cap on the floor and all this sort of stuff. And then he made a comment to Hamilton saying, "Yeah, but you had," I'm just paraphrasing, of course, but he said, "Yeah, you had a fast car for 7 years or something."
7 years ago.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like, okay, yeah, Lewis Hamilton, that time has passed. He had this massive run and everything, but it's just, you kind of think, is that something that Oscar would do? Is that something, there's a time to be a certain way and there is a time isn't, and I suppose having a camera in the cool-down room is to give us exactly these kind of things. But Norris is he's a great driver. He's superb on his day. He's quick, but there are things he says and does, and how he responds, especially if Piastri beats him, for example, that just kind of make me go, yeah, that's not perhaps the right frame of mind to have, I think.
Okay, well, the cool down room thing, I think it was a case of Lewis Hamilton, whenever he loses, he praises the equipment of the other driver. Yeah? So he always says, oh my god, you guys were so fast on the straights, or oh my god, you guys were so fast in the slow corners, or so instead of Hamilton saying congratulations, you had a 1-2, or sorry, you had to give up your position, or whatever, he says, wow, you guys were really fast. And I think deep down Lewis Hamilton is saying that because he doesn't want to admit that he might be actually slower than them himself. So he praises the equipment. And these guys in the paddock, they talk to each other, and they probably have WhatsApp groups and whatever, and Max and Lando, they talk to each other all the time, and I'm 100% sure they will text each other saying, did you hear what Lewis said? Lewis said that your teammates were all weak, or so for Lewis to say that at that moment, that is something that has built up in Lando Norris with everything that he knows from Lewis, and then that came out. Lewis Hamilton can be very disingenuous with these things. Like he was on camera shaking Verstappen's hand, but then in all the comments he says, there's never any hostility from me, but with him, you're always sure that there is some. So basically he's saying, it was a racing incident, it's not my fault, but Verstappen's always hostile. And he does that for his own fans. Team LH, they lap that up. And they're straight onto Twitter, and they make it this much bigger. And he knows that, because everything that Lewis Hamilton says or does is being looked at with a magnifying glass. And if he says something positive about another driver, then they'll just discard it, because they pick out of what he says, they pick out what they can use to fight.
Really, and it's what you mentioned there about Hamilton in the cool down room. I'm not on his side at all. I think he's a good driver. I'm not particularly a Lewis Hamilton fan myself, but he does that. He does do that, and he does have this following behind him. And any time Hamilton is included in the conversation, as you said, it's made 10 times bigger. And I'm sure you might know as a content creator yourself, like anytime you do a video which touches on Hamilton, mentions him, whether it's a good light or a bad light, there'll always be some sort of extra little flow of comments, isn't there? So it's a very interesting subject, and obviously there's still the whole thing about Hamilton and Verstappen, from a few years ago and everything. That didn't affect me because at the time I wasn't really supporting either, to be honest. I was George Russell and Williams in those days, but it's fascinating to see how that all goes on, and if you talk about pre-arranged stuff, like you said, Hamilton, he's got his whole team behind him, his whole machine, everything's all pre-arranged. In this scenario you say this, in this other scenario you say that. He's all got it pre-planned.
But that's what disappoints me, that he's made out to be this massive superstar, but a lot of his comments come from a deep insecurity, and sometimes they're very petty.
Yeah, I can see what you mean.
Like I touched on this earlier, saying everybody's praising Max Verstappen, but I had tougher teammates. That's not something someone says that is really secure in himself and above it all. You know, that's something.
Yeah.
Who's actually annoyed with the praise a competitor is getting, and then he needs to get that out. You know, and then Max, you know, he's very hot-tempered in the car, but outside of the car, he said, "Yeah, well, it's not a very nice thing to say about my teammates." And today in qualifying, 3 of them were ahead of him, and that's it. You know,
that's a very interesting take, actually.
He drops the mic and he's gone.
Yeah.
And all this nonsense about, you know, political stands and fashion. You know, Max wears Red Bull outfits all the time, and if he's not wearing a Red Bull outfit, then he's wearing a white shirt.
Definitely, and it's going to be fascinating to see how Hamilton then moves on to Ferrari later down the line. Maybe touch on this later, but he has the run of the place at Mercedes now, and he has certain allowances. He has all this sort of stuff, and you know, how is that all going to go down at Maranello? Like, that is going to be so interesting to see.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I also made a video about that, and the thumbnail was you know that gate they have in Maranello where it says Ferrari above the gate.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I downloaded the Ferrari font, and I changed it into "Welcome to Hell" with Lewis Hamilton in Ferrari gear, because he's going to get hit by so many things he isn't used to. You know, the language is Italian there, and he says, "Yeah, I want to learn Italian." It's not going to work. He's not going to learn another language at 40.
That's it, like, no, and like the working language is Italian, isn't it? And it's not just that; it's a whole different mentality as well.
Charles Leclerc speaks Italian, so if there's any strife between the two of them, you know, Leclerc will come in and go, parla questo,
Yeah, exactly.
and Lewis will be standing there. What did he say? What was that?
And something like that could
would make
just
you
give him
paranoid.
that extra 2%, couldn't it? You know, that extra, just to win favour in the garage. And you know, first impressions is key. And you know, if he's going to make it work, it's going to be interesting, because I think he's just going to try and come in and dominate. And I just have a feeling that is not going to go down well at Ferrari at all.
No, but then another thing is, like, I think Bono is great, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Peter Bonington, he's got a cool head on him. Like, GP and he are the two best engineers out there. And those drivers have a manual, and they know exactly how to talk to their drivers. And Peter Bonington, he'll set out the strategy, and they'll put Lewis on mediums, and then 5 laps in, Lewis will come to the radio and say, "Oh man, I don't think these are the right tires, man." And at the end of the day, the strategy always works. You know, he'll get the lap times out of it, and he'll get into the position they had managed for him. Now, try to do that at Ferrari. Now, I don't know the name of Carlos Sainz's engineer.
I don't either.
There's not too many really weird, crazy things that his strategists have done. Also, because if they make up a strange plan for Carlos Sainz, he'll say, "Stop inventing."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's true.
But I don't see Lewis Hamilton doing that. You know, reading a race and then saying, "Hey, I'm better off doing this," or "I'm better off doing that." So that's
the
another thing.
And it does make you think, like, when you look at that aspect of it, when you think of drivers, how, you know, going back from like the 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, you know, where they had to make decisions on the fly. They had to decide, is now the time for wets? Is now the time for fuel? You know, and I don't really see how it could ever happen, but I would love to see the decisions put more in the driver's hands rather than the team of mathematicians and scientists they have at the team. You know, I would love to. I don't know how anyone would ever make it work, but for that to be put more in the driver's hands would be fantastic. But then at the same time, it is the team's car. They've got 2 cars running around the track worth many, many millions, and it's their asset, and they want to guide it home in one piece. And so then they have to have a say on pits and strategy and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, it's 2 sides, I suppose. But we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, McLaren have been fairly iffy with strategy recently. That's probably their biggest kind of shortcoming recently, I think. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that.
Oh, the same. If you see how Red Bull has operated the last, they've always been good at strategy for as long as I've been watching, those 7 years. Besides Daniel Ricciardo's failed pit stop in Monaco, I don't remember many, big errors in their strategy. And, their pit stops have always been quick, and the few wins they used to get out of the races were also a lot of times thanks to the Red Bull strategy and Max Verstappen putting the laps in that he needed to do and the overtakes that he needed to do. But then McLaren could have easily won 4 or 5 races this season if they had better pit stops and better strategy at times.
Yeah, they've certainly got a lot. I don't know what you would probably call it. I don't want to say growing up, but they have to kind of transition from being sort of an upper midfield team to a top team now. Like, I think that right now it appears that they've got the best car on the grid. A couple of upgrades from other teams might change that, but right now I think they do. And it's just the strategy, I suppose, that's letting them down. Obviously, it's still up for debate whether, Lando was right to let Piastri past. There are 2 sides of that. But it's going to be very, very, very interesting to see how McLaren go to the end of the season, because I think they can absolutely win more races. But they just need the strategy to marry it all together.
Yeah, I think that there's a time now where they should realize that you're okay asking Oscar questions about what tires he wants and let him set out a strategy for himself, but Lando Norris isn't. If the back and forth for him to get those shiny new yellow tires in Silverstone, or those used softs, because Lewis Hamilton was wearing them, that went up and down 3-4 times, and then at split second the team decided to put him on softs. That was a weak call. That wasn't smart.
Yeah, and it's funny how I think for a little while, I think early on, Lando, I remember he used to kind of not argue, but maybe perhaps disagree or question what his engineers said, and well, from my perspective he did anyway. He kind of stopped doing that for a while, but I think it appears now he's kind of started to do it again. And meanwhile, Oscar Piastri, he just kind of does what he's told for now. We'll wait and see if he develops a bit more of maybe perhaps a bit more of an ego to question that, but right now, they have this different way. But I think McLaren, from your perspective, Max, Red Bull fan, can McLaren catch Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship?
Well, if the car keeps being quicker, then yes. And if Max doesn't get a better teammate, then they're going to lose some points every race, and they'll get the Constructors. But Mercedes won the Constructors' Championship in 2021, and for some reason they were constantly talking about something else.
It's weird that, isn't it? Because we're forever hearing the Constructors' Championship is the priority, isn't it? That's where they say that's where the money is and all this sort of stuff. But from a PR perspective, what the fans care about, they want the driver. they won the Drivers' Championship, and where that all goes. So it's going to be very interesting. I think that's going to be the fight. The Drivers' Championship, I'd say, is probably pretty sewn up by now. Like Red Bull and Max would have to do something catastrophic to lose it at this stage.
Oh yeah, catastrophic. Like the brake disc exploding in Australia, that cost Max probably 25 points.
Yeah, it did.
And that could happen again, and then the pressure on Max is getting bigger again. Then there might be more incidents. So in those 11 races, there's plenty of points still to be got.
Exactly.
And Max Verstappen is warning Red Bull for that as well. That's why he's saying things like, it seems like not everybody's on the same page about this. It's probably one of the reasons why he freaked out so much during the race.
It's a different. It seems like a different operation, and there's something. I don't know if this is going to annoy people, but up until recently, it seems. I can't remember exactly when this sort of stopped, but in the early part of the season when Sainz won, all these other drivers won. It was because Verstappen had an incident.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is something that people tend to forget, that very few people right now have beaten Max on merit properly when Max has got a car that's 100% health and when he's trying 100%. I think, when Piastri won this weekend, I think that was the first time, or one of the first times, that Max has been beaten when his car's at 100%. And
the last two races,
yeah,
McLaren was faster, and there was no way Max could win.
Yeah.
The two stints in Silverstone were poor. He just couldn't get it together. And in the last stint, they put him on those hard tires, and that gave him an offset because they lasted way longer, and he could go quicker on them. If that race was two laps longer, he probably would have gotten Hamilton as well. But that was a fair win. And then the one before that, if Red Bull didn't have that slow pit stop, then Lando Norris wouldn't have gotten close enough in that last stint for them to fight the way they did, and then having that DNF. And the race before that, was that Monaco? Oh, they were beaten on merit.
Well,
as well,
Leclerc won Monaco, didn't he?
Because that was they just couldn't set up the car properly, and it'll probably go that way again in Singapore.
Yeah, it's going to be very. I mean, they've certainly got to pull it together or get on top of what's been wrecking their chances. But the final Grand Prix going into the summer, final Grand Prix going into the summer break, this is the one that everyone is really going to try, and this is the one they need to win, just to give them that, that proper mentality over the month off. I think, for Max, it's, it will do himself and the team a world of good to win at Spa. But I think it's going to, for example, if Lando Norris wins at Spa, then that could quite possibly be the thing to spur McLaren on and, for them to really take hold of things in the second half of the season.
Yeah, for the people watching this at a later date, it's Thursday today, and it's just before the Belgium Grand Prix. Last weekend we had the Hungarian Grand Prix, which was won by Piastri, thanks to team orders.
There you go.
Did you see my video about that?
About the team orders at the Hungarian Grand Prix?
Yeah.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
About Norris, that he needs to be way more selfish to become a world champion.
I agree with you, and I think I actually touched on a same thing in my video, where like these guys of the past, Schumacher, Vettel, and all this sort of stuff, they probably just would have turned their radio off, just driven faster, and just got the win, and just not even questioned what the team said. It just wouldn't be in their nature to do that, and if there is any fallout or any kind of negative stuff afterwards, just deal with it, because in a month's time, no one's going to remember.
Yeah, well, and if they do, then you've given off a signal like that I'm the alpha here, and don't ever ask me that again. Because he helped Piastri in the saddle. Norris had to wait 5 years to get his first win.
Yeah.
And Piastri has it in his second year now. He's only going to get better this way, and that's not going to help Norris win a championship next year if Oscar Piastri gets even better.
Absolutely. I mean, Piastri, there are still some things he has to do to tidy up. I mean, there was a couple of moments at Hungary where he put his car onto the gravel and all this sort of stuff. But I think Piastri, he has the potential to be the more complete package than Lando. And something I'm kind of wondering about for next year, 2025, is if McLaren do have the dominant car, the race winning car, is the team big enough for two of them? Can they accommodate both of them in that? If it is a solely McLaren battle for the championship, it may not be, but if it was, can they do it?
An Alonso Hamilton scenario, the 2007 scenario, is looming then.
Well, exactly, and the team doesn't have. I think when it happened in 2007, McLaren still had guys left over from, the Hakkinen days and all this sort of stuff. So they dealt with champions and battles, but I think you have to wonder, and I really have no idea, but like in the McLaren team now, do they have the experience to deal with something like that? How can they make sure that doesn't cause the team to implode like an inter-team
They're
battle?
not being helped by Zach Brown and Stella always talking about, we want to win championships, we want to win prizes, but we want to do it fairly, and we want to do it the proper way, because Sunday looked messy as hell.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's how you kind of look at it, and I think I'll be interested to hear what you think on this. But I've probably, when it comes to following F1, I've looked at it more as on the team's perspective, I suppose, rather than the drivers. Shout out to F1 Manager, by the way, massively underrated game back in the day. And also, when you look years ago of when Irvine was supporting Schumacher or Coulthard or Hakkinen, I think it's not so good to have maybe a 1 and 2 driver, but if you have got a number 2 driver who knows exactly what his role is, exactly what he's there to do, it's fantastic. And I think Red Bull potentially did or do have this with Perez, but with him just misfiring so much, it's seriously going to cost them.
Oh yeah, they definitely need to upgrade Perez, but they shouldn't put Lando Norris in that second seat, or Lewis Hamilton, or even Carlos Sainz, because those guys they have way too much ambition, and that's why I think Daniel Ricciardo is a good option, because anything is better than that RB Cash App thingy team that he's in now.
Well, it's got to come from inside Red Bull, doesn't it? I think Perez is probably the first driver Red Bull have hired externally in a long time.
Yeah, that's true. But if you put Liam Lawson in there as well, he's gonna, try to put everything together and beat Max in qualifying and beat Max in the races when he can. And Max has an incredible lot of power these days, with him being backed by Helmut Marko and him backing Helmut Marko back. Those two are intertwined. And that's one thing. that's maybe not so good about Red Bull is that at the minute Max Verstappen has a tiny little bit too much power, and the old Red Bull would have kicked Perez to the streets last year. You know,
this is it, and I don't. I think I touched on this in a video ages ago, but I think there's a serious gap in the market right now in F1 for just a number 2 driver who is there just to get paid and just do what he's told. I think, of course, they're all there. They all want to win championships. They all want to win. You won't get there unless you have that mentality. But if there was, especially with this Red Bull second seat, if there was someone who was just like, how much you paying me? What do you want me to do during the race? Yeah, sure. Okay, fine. I'll do that. And, let's take Perez, for example. If he had that mentality when he came in and performed well and literally just accepted that his job was to finish just behind Verstappen, just finish second every race. That is your job. And if he was doing this, he could carve out a career, for a long, long time still to go. So, if someone came along with that mentality for a top team, I think that would seriously work. But I think fans probably wouldn't like that too much. They'd get annoyed and say, why isn't he being more aspirational, I suppose.
Yeah, well, with Red Bull, there's another thing, and that is that Max likes his car so set up in a way with the pointy nose, and he can catch the rear being loose. And Perez was always a driver with a more balanced setup. That's the first mistake they made, taking this guy who's been in Mercedes powered engines all these years with low rake and long wheelbases, and put him in that high rake Red Bull car and thinking that he could perform the way he did before.
Yeah, and that wouldn't be the first to happen. F1 is littered with drivers who did very well in a midfield car, and as soon as they moved up to a faster car, it just didn't work out.
No,
it didn't happen. Even as you mentioned at the start of the podcast, Frenton, when he went to Williams back in the day, everything on paper was showing that he could do the job, but he couldn't. And Perez is an interesting one because I think he was fantastic at Racing Point and those sort of teams, but the upper level and all the pressures and all the other things that come with it, something hasn't worked. But I think if you were to take Perez out of Red Bull, and if you were to put him into, say,
Aston Martin
or a Williams or something, he would be good again. I think if people could just maybe look a bit deeper, he would be quite a good person to go for, I think.
But Perez got a little bit destroyed by Max as well. I think the first hit that Perez got was when Max didn't give up his place in Brazil in 2022.
Yeah.
And that was all to do with settling a score from the Monaco crash he had in qualifying. And Max, being as dominant as he is, he nipped a sort of a rebellion. He nipped that in the bud by saying, I'm not moving out of my way for you. I'm 6 seconds ahead of you, even though I had a crash and I started way back. So that's not going to happen. Then the next season came and Perez won 2 races because Max was still struggling with the setup.
Mm-hmm.
And then the upgrades came, and in Baku he found out something on his car or in his setup that worked. So the last stint in Baku he was way faster than Perez already. And after that came Miami, and Max started from P9, and Perez was on pole, and then still say 18, 19 laps before the finish, Max passed him and won the race by 16 seconds. And then Max was pointing at the car at the number 1. That was all Max asserting his dominance. So coming back to Piastri and Norris, Norris just showed Piastri that they're level.
Yeah.
equals.
Absolutely.
And that's a dangerous place to be in if you want to be a world champion.
No, you're absolutely right. And something you touched on that I'd love to get your view on. You mentioned when Max wouldn't let Perez pass. Was it the Brazilian Grand Prix? You said.
Yeah.
As a Max fan, did you agree with that? Were you on his side?
When it happened, I cringed.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god, he's already champion, and why would you do that? And there was a huge fallout after it. But then, Jos Verstappen took to the papers.
Yeah.
And explained it all, or sort of subtly hinted towards what happened. Martin Brundle knew exactly what happened as well. During the commentary, he said, oh, this is still something to do with. And they were pissed off with Red Bull as well, because in Monaco, Max was only behind Perez thanks to Perez's crash.
Yeah.
But then the first round of pit stops came, and they put Perez in first because he was ahead. And the Verstappen said the only reason why he was ahead was that thanks to that crash. So they should have pitted Max first.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually really great. I think it's great you said that, because I know we touched on earlier about drivers who you support, or maybe some you don't. I think it's really important in F1, even if you support a driver, to disagree with them or call out something that they've done which is bad, because I think certainly recently with particular drivers there are fans who will, no matter what, they'll die on that hill of whatever they do or say. So it's really important, I think, even if you support a driver, to be able to come away and go, nah, that was a stupid thing to do, didn't agree with that. So
I usually don't even react to I have a lot of arguments on Twitter, but I usually don't even react to drivers doing or saying anything. I'll have a little comment about it, and that's it. But it's usually the media, they take a stance on Max Verstappen, and then I defend that. And that's how I get into arguments on Twitter about that. Because
that's the thing, because you're up against...
They put a stamp on a situation, and... the opinion of a lot of loud people is made then, and that's what I'm always fighting. And this is the reason why I started my YouTube channel and did my that's why I'm doing my content in English, to show a different perspective in the language that they all speak.
And it's interesting because I think obviously there's. You have to admit there is some sort of bias, I think, with English-speaking media. They're not going to be as favourable towards Verstappen, say, as the Dutch media, for example. So, I think take on board what the media says, look at both arguments, and then make your own decision. I think that's, in my opinion, that's the best way to go.
Well, we had Formula One with Ziggo. And we had a guy that was in the pits, the pit reporter, Jack Ploy. And he was like Ted Kravitz, but maybe even a little simpler.
Okay.
And he fell out with Cyril Abiteboul because Renault was giving Max the wrong engines. Mm-hmm. And they've fallen out with Toto Wolff many times, because when the whole 2021 fight was at its height, they always asked Toto Wolff these nasty questions, and always favouring Verstappen and Red Bull. And I have to say, now that Viaplay has taken over the rights in the Netherlands, it's a lot better. I still don't watch them often because I watch F1 TV and I listen to the Sky Sports F1 commentary.
Yeah.
Because it gives me inspiration for my next rant about them.
It's funny you mentioned commentary. I literally had a thought today, and with the rise of AI and all this sort of stuff, like, are we at the stage now where we could make an AI Murray Walker for commentary?
Well, the thing is that when you're watching a soap, I don't know, do you watch EastEnders?
Not really.
I used to watch it when I lived in the UK, but you had this villain called Phil. You had this this rough voice. Phil, what you doing?
Geezer.
They're always in the Vic. But anyway, F1 has a narrative as well, and it needs its villains. And as in the commentary, Ted Kravitz and at the minute Crofty as well. They're the villains, and Martin Brundle and his son Alex, they're the good guys now, and I enjoy that as well.
That's the thing. I mean, Martin Brundle. I mean, he does such a superb job. I think he's one of these guys we probably don't appreciate his input, and when he's not at races, I find I miss him so much. Like his analysis and everything, it's fantastic. And I think the way the presentation, or the way it's presented of races on TV, it's become a certain way where it's very kind of celebrity driven, very that side of things, and Liberty Media's probably got a say in that. But I find that Martin Brundle tries to rein that in a bit. And when he's doing his grid walk, clearly he's got an earpiece in that's saying something like, "Oh, Brad Pitt's over there, go and talk to Brad Pitt," or "This person's got a new album out, go and talk to them." But actually, after we're done with this, go and look at grid walks from previous years. Go and look at some random grid walk from like the 2000s or the 90s where Brundle's doing it, and it's amazing how much it's changed. It really is. When in those days they'd talk about, like, it's very it's very inside, data driven and all this sort of stuff, and it's very, very, very interesting. Whereas now it's just like,
wasn't it on a grid walk where Martin Brundle walked towards very young Kimi Räikkönen and said, "Hey, you missed the anthem," and he goes, "Yeah, I was having a shit."
Yeah, I was in the lavatory. Yeah.
So it's going to be a long podcast this way. Next season, what are your expectations?
Next season, God, 2025 already, isn't it? I think next year is going to be absolutely insane. It's the final year before the regulation changes, so I think it's all kind of going to come to a point. I hope, anyway. I think McLaren are going to be a very dominant force, but it's going to be interesting though, because this season is the first time it looks like they're going to start a season well and end a season well. Normally they haven't been able to do that. It's one or the other, so it's going to be interesting to see if they can do that. Then of course you've got Hamilton at Ferrari, and whatever that throws up, you're going to have Max potentially with a new teammate next season.
Or in a new team. We don't know. Perhaps, Toto Wolff doesn't seem to want to put those stories to bed at all, because it's probably very helpful for him. And I think it's going to be absolutely fascinating. And we've got guys like, we've got, Ollie Behrman coming in as well, who did an amazing job at Ferrari earlier in the season. So we'll wait and see what he does. And it's a lot harder in the Haas, though.
Oh God, yeah.
But
as long as he just,
like, if he scores a P13, it's like, oh my God, he did a P13 in the Haas. And if he does a P18, it's like, yeah, it's a Haas.
Low expectations, isn't it? Just
because if he was to be put in a Ferrari, and he keeps scoring P7s, and Leclerc is putting it on pole and winning, then he'll get criticism. Maybe not the first year, but
very interesting point. I mean, probably the first half of 2025, his job is just to deliver the car back with all four wheels on it, and he's done a good job. But it's going to be very interesting 2025. Just trying to think what else interesting is happening next year. What else?
Well, while you're thinking, every season I'm surprised by a team dropping off or a team jumping up. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So when 2023 started, we were all surprised with Aston Martin's pace, and then they dropped off again, and they still haven't found it. Then McLaren started really poorly, and then worked their way up, and they're still very good. But I wouldn't be surprised if they put an upgrade on, and that will make their car unstable again, or like Ferrari, they'll start bouncing again, or you know what I mean. There will be a limit to how they can develop, and they'll get problems, just as Red Bull is having problems now. And Ferrari has been disappointing after they had a good start this season, but I wouldn't be surprised if towards the end of the season they start winning again. Then this season we had Mercedes being happy with the changes on the car, but they were still too slow, and I have to give it to them, they won 2 races in a row. And you know, I was watching qualifying closely, and the way they can throw the car into the corners now, and the way how stable it looks, that was really impressive compared to the 2 years before. So
Definitely.
I don't know if that was Lewis Hamilton's input, but whatever they did, that did work. So yeah, I think 2025 could be a banger season with 5 teams operating at the top.
God, we hope so. I mean, it looks like it's going to be like perhaps the culmination of, like you said, 4 teams, perhaps 5, all coming together. I mean, it's a lovely idea, but realistically, is it going to be? You know, normally a season is 2 teams, 3 maximum. But even like, how many race winners have we had this season? Is it 7?
7, yeah.
And there's still room for more, probably. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see. And
I saw a statistic today. McLaren, the 2 drivers have both won. Mercedes, the 2 drivers have both won. And Ferrari, the 2 drivers have both won. Except Red Bull. They've only had 1 driver winning. But then he won 7 of them, so...
That's a very interesting one. In fact, you just reminded me of something I saw in a post-race interview at Hungary, where they were talking to Lando Norris, and they said, like, what do you think? Obviously, I'm just paraphrasing, but it said, you know, what do you think about Piastri winning? And Norris said something along the lines of, yeah, it's great to see that he's won a proper race, alluding to, you know, his sprint race victory from last season. And I thought, oh, that's a burn, isn't it?
Yeah, and those little comments is why a lot of people don't like Lando Norris. He's getting a lot of hate at the minute.
That's what
it's those tiny little things, like if he'd given up the place straight away, then that would be that. You know, that was the deal. Boom, Piastri's ahead, and that's it. Okay, but now he was just teasing the team and pretending he wasn't going to give the seat back, probably hoping that they would agree with him or something. You know, the idle hope of them saying, you know what, you made a good case, you can stay ahead. Yeah. But then to finally do it anyway, you know, it just made it all even more pathetic, actually.
Yeah. No, it's a very good point. I mean, he knew exactly what he was doing, and he probably milked it and made it a lot more. He could have done a much, much better job of it. But yeah, I think Norris is obviously, he's got a massive fan base, particularly in the UK. Like, it's, you know, it's actually what I mentioned earlier on merchandise. It's very, what I mentioned on merchandise earlier. It's interesting because when you see the McLaren stuff, you also have a name on the back. And everyone was Norris everywhere. So, but I think he's got some rebuilding. Some rebuilding in terms of PR and things like that. He's got to put a few things right. I think maybe I don't know who his manager is or anything, but maybe he needs someone like, you know, Mark Webber. Is it someone just sensible? Does Martin Brundle not manage someone significant? Does he not have?
Don't know.
Do I not? I vaguely. I might be cocking this up completely, but I don't know if
I doubt
Norris
it,
is
though.
one of Brundle's
how can
clients
you
or
give
something,
commentary and then be manager of one of the drivers?
I don't know. To be continued. I can't remember. I don't know, but
We need to look it up.
yeah, but maybe I think he needs. I don't know if he needs someone else in his ear or something. But it's fascinating to see two drivers that appear, when you look at them, identical, but just completely different in terms of personality, approach, all this sort of stuff. It's amazing, and it's one of those things I think that makes F1 one of the greatest sports in the world.
Yeah.
Those different personalities, and it's we're coming to the we finished Spa, and then we're off for a month with the season break and everything, but there's all the drama and fuss and everything that's going on in that month, and I hope there is anyway, otherwise I won't have anything to write about. So
you can make a few what do you call it, evergreen content.
Yeah, the 5 greatest liveries of all time, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would like to try and get more into historic stuff, I think, because that's something that's just fascinating.
Well, I wanted to ask you earlier. I have an idea about the rotation we had at Williams when Frank Williams was there. Damon Hill became a world champion, got kicked out. Nigel Mansell became world champion, got kicked out.
Oh, yes, yeah.
There's a list of about 8 drivers. Thierry Boutsen was there and I got kicked out. And one after the other. I think there's a good video in that. The revolving doors of the old Williams team.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it appears all these guys, they won a championship, and for one reason or another, I think the only one to win a title at Williams in those years and hang around afterwards was Villeneuve. But
didn't
Frank,
he go to BAR? Or?
Yes, he did. Yeah, but Frank never liked to pay people a lot of money. That was the issue. But if you want something, read about Mansell's return to Williams in '94, because that is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, well, I have a video recorded. I still need to finish editing it, and it's about all the big injuries he had, and then one in particular that was funny. But
what, Mansell, you mean?
I don't want...
You mean Mansell?
Mansell, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're going to close this off nearly. We were talking about the next season, but do you have a wild prediction for this season?
So is it something I think that will happen, or something that I want to happen?
Well, just something wild that you want. But yeah, well, I'll leave it up to you.
So something I want to happen this season. So, I mean, I really, truly would love it if Hulkenberg got his podium. I think considering where he's off to next season, this is probably his best shot, I think, now. I don't know what's going to happen with Sauber and when I don't know what's going to happen with Sauber and when it becomes Audi. I think that's going to be a cluster, but given where Haas are now, particularly somewhere like Spa, all it takes is a bit of carnage and a bit of weather, and he could do it. That is something I would really, really love to see. That would make my day. And I think really another thing I think is that it would be really, really great to see a exchange, perhaps, between McLaren as we start to close off the season. I think the Constructors' Championship is going to be a massive one as we get towards the end, and sort of a little battle, shall we say, between Norris and Piastri towards the end, exchanging wins. I think is just going to be amazing to watch.
Yeah, I think my wild prediction is that Piastri and Norris are going to have it out towards the end of the season, and it's going to end badly, with one car or both cars DNFing.
Oh, that would be be something else. I mean, both cars, taking each other out or something like that on the first corner. Oh, Christ, that would be something else. Everything would be kicked into overdrive.
I'd like it to be Norris that retires, and then Oscar not even being fazed by it. Like, he came across me, and it was his own fault. Oscar.
And that was it. And just very quickly, do you think Perez will be around by the end of the season? What do you reckon?
No, I firmly believe that he's going to be replaced after Spa. Horner and Marco have hinted in that direction, and Horner said you can't run on one leg, and he used the word unsustainable.
Powerful word.
That's firm language.
Yeah, it's a big word.
And I think there's something going on with contracts and sponsors as well. Like I've seen a list of Perez's sponsors with Disney Plus there, and all kinds of cereals and whatever. It's massive.
It's a huge. Yeah, I've seen the list as well. It's huge.
If they demand that he signs a long contract, and he did, then those contracts with the sponsors, they're okay. And if it doesn't stipulate that Perez can be sacked if he's more than 100 points behind Max at the halfway point, then those contracts will keep running, and Perez will not have a seat.
Exactly, and then there'll be potentially a big money pit to fill next year. So
yeah, but Red Bulls, they've got plenty of money.
I'm sure they do. And if not, get Lance Stroll on the phone, see what happens.
Or Guan Yu Zhou.
Yeah, have the
He
rest
always
of...
brings 30 millions with him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
God, that'd be an interesting
Well,
prospect.
let's hope that this podcast gets 1 million views. That would be nice.
Yeah, that would make my day. Absolutely. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
If it happens, I'll share
great.
the revenue with you.
Oh, just buy me a pint. That's all you need to do.
Oh, okay. It's just usually my podcast have about like $1 in revenue.
So it pays for a packet of crisps and maybe something teeny at the till, but it's worth it at the end of the day. And I think it's great to see. I've watched your podcast before, and I think it's great, and I love what you do, and we're just going to keep it up.
You were a lovely guest.
Delivers. Thank you so much.
And we'll definitely keep in touch. Where can we find you?
Where can you find me? If you go onto YouTube, check out the Grid Gab, hosted by myself, and
I'll leave a link.
I'll leave a link below. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a one-man operation. It's just myself. On Instagram, if you look up Paul the Landry, and I'm on Twitter as well. But Twitter's a process and operation. It's a lot of hard work and quite short for time, but we'll wait and see how it goes.
All right, then. Right, people. Thanks very much for watching this podcast, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care now. Doei doei.